Well, welcome. How are we doing? Thursday before spring break. Are we feeling it? Maybe. All right. Okay. I had to ask, my seniors last hour, and for them, it's like the realization that 2/3 of their school year is pretty much gone, and they're on the final stretch of their high school career. But many of them are just sticking around the CG and not necessarily going on spring break, but a few of them are, and all that. But we do have a little spring break coming up, so hopefully we take some time to do some relaxing, or maybe have to finish up some business with some classes, or if you're full diploma candidate working on that, maybe starting some stuff related to that, or whatever, or working, all that stuff. All right, so here we go. We are pretty much today wrapping up the Second World War, kind of get some closure with the Second World War, and but then also get some time to finish up some assignments as well. Some of you have already turned in the atomic bomb activity, and so we'll work on that today, finish that up. If you're done with that, there are other things to work on too, like that enrichment assignment on the Holocaust, American response to the Holocaust, take advantage of that piece. Or if you're missing some other assignments, just get that taken care of as well. But I am going to take a little bit of time here to focus on the consequences of World War II, or the Second World War. And when I talk about consequences, when you use that word consequence, what comes to mind? We talk about use of language, use of terms. What do we you think about when we think of consequences? Usually negative. There's a negative connotation to it. Can there ever be a positive consequence? I don't know, but that's a good point. Usually there's a negative connotation to it. I suppose if we change the word from consequence to impact, can there be a positive and a negative with impact? Yeah. All right. So again, use of language, something that I always sometimes throw out there. There's never innocent language. We always use a term for a reason, it seems like. All right. What I do is I do want to look at consequences of World War II here, and some of it is negative. Some of it definitely is negative when we look at consequences of the Second World War. And again, there are moments that I do sometimes lecture. Miss Iden might make fun of me and says this is when you get in your zone and you forget. And I do have a copy of these online in Schoology. And this again is sometimes a question that appears on the IB exam, and maybe next year we'll actually take the IB exam 2 years in a row. History has not taken it. We'll be taking an IB exam here. But the consequences of the Second World War, well, before you even get to the consequences, I mean, what was the secret sauce for the Allies, if we think about that? Why did the Allies win? All right, let's brainstorm on that. Why did the Allied powers, and the United States is part of the Allied powers, why did they win? What do we think?
Despite Germany having the advantage,
sit down and put a mic in front of your face. Why did the Allies win? Anyone at home?
Despite Germany having that original Blitzkrieg advantage, their victory was more based on speed rather than power. So once the full throttle of the Allies with American production, Soviet blood, and British intelligence went full in.
All right, so we're going with the bigger, faster, stronger approach here. All right, fast, yes, but bigger, faster, stronger, looking at a more being able to sustain it over time. All right, good points. Anyone else? Any other thought? Can't just say because, the United States is part of it. But United States typically on the winning side, usually. But it is all about, and I did talk a little bit about this in the beginning as well, but Grand Alliance. It's more than just the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. The Grand Alliance, there are a number of nations that make up it. At least, we're talking at least 15 nations, and plenty more that become the basis of the United Nations. But the Grand Alliance, the fact of how big it is, comes to play here as well. And then you look at that manpower in the industrial complex too. Wartime conferences, they wanted to make sure they're all on the same page. Like at Tehran in 1943, they talked about the Normandy invasion, which is D-Day, opening up that second front. That's what Stalin always wanted. And that was going to be a key here. Yalta, now it's talking about the occupation of Germany and post-war Europe. So they already can get a sense of the end is there. And if they can talk about it and what it might look like is going to be key here. And then Potsdam as well. And just like in some of those video clips mentioned, that's when the United States announced we had the atomic bomb, and that was going to be very important as well. So Potsdam also speaks about occupation of Germany, but also of Japan, and what to do after the war. Because after the First World War, people kind of basically said, "See ya, I'm going to go back home," and the rebuilding process was very difficult for some of these nations. After this war, that may not necessarily be the case here. Time, resources were the key here. And so when we talk about time can be viewed as a resource. And what Zach had talked about, that this is going to be a long drawn out war. And sure enough, that will. And resources will be the key. And the United States and the Soviet Union has a lot of resources here that will come into play. Of course, manpower. United States and the Soviet Union did look like we had quite a few individuals. I mean, we put about 16 million GIs in the uniform. The Soviet Union can almost double that. So manpower is going to be huge here. I mean, Germany at the end, they will actually have some that are 13 years old in their uniform. Can you imagine what you were doing when you were 13? What grade were you at when you were 13? Maybe like 7th, 8th grade. I mean, think about that. You're in 7th and 8th grade. That was probably the furthest from your mind here. But if you were living in Germany and you're a young boy, young man, you're going to be putting on most likely the uniform and defending the fatherland against the Red Army or the American GI. That's huge. And then some of them were as old as 65 years old. Guys probably like, man, I fought in the First World War. I thought I'm done. I got to fight in the Second World War. So manpower definitely comes to play here. Industrial complex as well. I mean, realistically, the United States. Was the United States attacked in this war? Were we attacked? Answers. Yeah, we were, but was places like Detroit, New York, LA, Mobile a place attack? No. So where we were attacked were primarily our territories, but not necessarily what we would consider the 48 United States, where our industrial heart is. So our industrial complex is in place, and the Soviet Union had already started moving their plants out east. So they're out of harm's way, and they're not fighting Japan yet. They weren't fighting Japan until August of 45, so much later. And then sometimes we do forget about the partisans, the nationalist activities. That little clip about the women was highlighting that piece there, but behind enemy lines. I mean, we even know about a guy by the name of Ho Chi Minh, who was working behind the scenes against the Japanese in Indochina. All right, Ho Chi Minh eventually become part of, the father of North Vietnam, and stuff like that. Or the French and the Polish partisan groups are well known as well. All right, but when we talk about the consequences here, the effects on the civilians, two-thirds of the casualties were civilians here. Poland is going to lose a fifth of their population because of this war. Displaced people, I mean, again, when we talk about targets, and when we talk about the Holocaust, we can, that's going to be very devastating, but then we also have to look out in the Pacific theater and the amount of people that were killed there as well, and what the Japanese were doing. And then, of course, we can look at our own types of bombings that we did as well. Displaced. That war is going to be displacing people. Definitely, they will do that. 20 million people are going to become displaced during the war, and maybe another 15 to 30 million after the war are going to be displaced. And a good number of them are going to be displaced after the war are actually going to be Germans. They're going to be kicked out of the countries that the German population was living in. Huge, huge, huge. Military deaths, well, as Zach had brought up, it's about total war and how we used our soldiers, and maybe poor strategic planning, all that plays a part there. So that's an impact, all right? And that could be a negative consequence. Here, it's going to take a little while for countries to recover with a loss of people like that, okay? And then when we look at the other impact of this war, economic and political, the first year I had taught the 12th grade class, and I had this image up. One of my students was from Poland, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, there's Poland, Pulaska," and she felt a little like, "Wow, there we go. I got something that I recognized with." When we look at border changes, after First World War, there's a lot of border changes. People take out the pink pearl eraser, erase some of the borders, and redefine empires are gone. After this war, very few borders change. The one that gets radicalized is Poland. The Soviet Union will push their border, western border, further into Poland as a result of the Nazi Soviet non-aggression pact. Goes all the way up to like what they call the Curzon line. And then Poland's border is pushed further westward into eastern part of Germany. And so now all that becomes Poland. So that's where you see the biggest changes there. Economic costs, of course, this is going to be very, very, very devastating. All over Europe and in Asia, you're not going to find many major cities not impacted. I mean, they're going to be bombed, 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 bombed. Of course, there's going to be major disruption to the infrastructure. But then when it comes to like making sure people are some of their basic needs are being met, which country in the world perhaps could best meet the needs, the basic necessities of people? When the war is over, which nation is standing that could possibly help others out with their basic needs? And basic needs is like food, clothing, shelter, all that stuff. Who possibly could be in that position?
U.S.
Absolutely, the United States is. And so this is where the United States now begins to embrace a different philosophy, which we know is a philosophy that's being changed today. And this is going to become very important to the United States because the rebuilding process, there is a humanitarian side to it, but there's also a geopolitical side to it because the Cold War is going to be happening, and also there could be some money to be made because trade. We like to trade and all that stuff. Occupation is going to happen. Germany is going to be occupied by 4 Allied powers: United States, Great Britain, Soviet Union, and France. France is elevated back to being a major power. And Japan is going to be occupied by the United States only. Soviet Union is a little PO'd. They're thinking they should have a right to occupy Japan. We're like, no. You could tell that the Grand Alliance is not so grand anymore. But then there's going to be some trials. The Nuremberg trials and the Tokyo trials, and they're going to go after the leaders of those countries. And why would they do that? What's the statement that they want to make? Why go after the leaders of those countries?
Often a lot of those leaders, well, in Japan's case especially, the leaders were seen as nearly godlike in comparison to the common man. So by showing them on trial for their actions, it kind of shows, well, it kind of brings back that reality of, yeah, no, they're just people.
Okay, they're just people. All right, we can build on that. The whole idea that doesn't matter what time, war or peacetime, you do something wrong, you do something as horrific as you see in this war, you're going to be held accountable. And the precedent set by Nuremberg and the Tokyo trials will be used in other trials when you have cases of atrocities. Just like in Kosovo and Rwanda, it's something in 12th grade we talk about, how these trials set precedents. That doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be held accountable for it. That's a that's a thought that not many agree. There are some, I shouldn't say many, there are some that don't agree with that. In the case of Nuremberg and Tokyo, it's only those of the defeated powers, their leaders being tried. Others are saying, there's plenty of others who are committing atrocities too. But then we also think about we are still going after some individuals from that war. Now and then you hear about a concentration camp guard that gets deported and sent back to their home country, whether it's Germany or Poland or the Ukraine, and they might get tried there. The new political realities here, I have the United Nations. Yeah, you're going to have the United Nations there. And so that's going to replace the old League of Nations that kind of failed miserably in collective security. Now, this was some of the things that you focused on when it came to your human impact of the war. Some of the social changes here. For women, was this a positive or a negative for them? If at the end of the day, if you looked at the balance sheet, positive or negative? I see some people in the class are kind of giving the heads up or bobbing a little bit here. So it would probably be a positive. It'd be a positive, but again, it varies from country to country. And it's not like all of a sudden a switch is going to be flipped and everyone is going to have full equality. But it's a positive. It's a step. It's moving in a direction where you are going to get more rights and privileges out there. Feminist movement's going to kickstart it. Job increases in the types, financial independence, range of skills, all that stuff happens, but then also it could vary again from country. Family life is going to be changed a lot here. If we want to find a time period in the United States, besides the 1970s, where we see a divorce rate increase, it is here. It's at the end of this war, because family dynamics has changed. We can talk. There's something about Perhaps marriages being compromised by this war for a variety of reasons there. But now that mom has gone off to work, that's changed the dynamics of the family too. So that's a problem, maybe, depending on what lens you're looking at here. But also in some of these countries too, where soldiers, in terms of how they behaved, could affect family life as well. In Germany, they had a program called Lebensborn, where SS soldiers had relationships with women outside of Germany. And there are thousands of kids that are born from those relationships. Now they are social outcasts. That's going to impact family life here. Ethnic conflicts. We hear about the Holocaust, but the ethnic conflicts just doesn't stop there. After the war, it's going to continue. It's not all of a sudden countries become no longer anti-Semitic, or they no longer have ethnic tensions. The war might have flared it up. And in this country, when we talk about minority rights, it does kickstart the civil rights movement. It does challenge the culture or the structures that we have here in the United States here. And the desegregation of our military is going to occur here as well. So minority rights in the United States are definitely going to be changing here. And it could vary depending on what lens you look at. And finally here, the last bit is the effects of the war on the international scene here. The United States and the Soviet Union emerge as superpowers. Which of those two have the nuclear capability? In 1945, US. By 1949, the nuclear club's going to have two. But the United States and the Soviet Union emerge as superpowers. In Europe, the Soviets, eastern part, Soviets are supreme. But in Western Europe and Asia, the United States has a greater presence. And so in the Cold War, that's going to emerge from 1945. You know, the early steps are happening to about 1950. That's our foundation era. There's going to be rising tension, and it's going to be ideological. In every shape and form, it's going to be very ideological, and it's going to be the Cold War foundations, where this is going to dominate all the way up to when the Soviet Union collapses. So we're looking at about 1992. So most of my formative years was during the Cold War. Now, in my day, I didn't have to go through any duck and cover drills. Mr. Moran did, or Mr. Ryan did. I didn't. I was spared of having to crawl underneath your desk. But could you, if you have to? Maybe. I know I could. But, you know, when I look at Mr. Leonard, there's no way. And Mr. Leonard, he's kind of like my twin brother. That's what we always would say when we coach next to each other on the sideline. That's my big brother. It's my big little brother, because I'm older. So the effects of the war on international relations, it's going to be far-reaching. It definitely will, and it's going to shape. And that can be a positive or a negative, depending on, again, what lens you look at, all that. All right, so war is over, and the rebuilding process begins. Okay, so with that, your task today, as we go back here, your task today is to complete the atomic bomb activity. You get that done, I would work on, you know, if you have time in your schedule, I'd do the enrichment activity. If you're missing some stuff, I take care of that. All right. Tomorrow we will not have a live Google Meet. So you do not need to check in with me tomorrow. I will keep my Google Meet open though, And you can check in. We can talk about missing work and stuff like that. But we will not have a live Google Meet. I will reach out to some individuals and encourage them to attend tomorrow, so we talk about some issues and things. But we will not have a live Google Meet tomorrow. Be consistent with Miss Iden as well.